It turns out that I've reserved the domain name odefood.com and set up an account with a shared hosting provider. So I want this site to run at odefood.com. Currently, the only thing here is a web page that my hosting provider has provided that describes how I can get this site set up. Now, every shared hosting provider will be a little bit different, but it turns out that the one I selected, discountasp.net, has some instructions that I can follow so that I can publish there using that publish tool from Visual Studio 2010. But it is going to require a few changes and a little bit of configuration. So let me do that and we'll come right back. I'll explain what I've changed and then we'll try to publish and put this site live. I'm just about ready to try a deployment, so let me give you a few of the steps that I had to go through to give you an idea of what you might have to do with your own shared hosting provider. First of all, I went into the tools that my shared hosting provider gives me so that I could manage and make sure that the ASP.NET version for my site is set to run 4.0. And I also have the ability inside of this control panel to go in and enable the web deployment tool. So that was off by default. It was something I explicitly had to turn on. So now that those two pieces are in place, I've also gone in the transformation file, and I'm going to deploy a debug version of the site. I've gone ahead and added a connection string that should connect to the SQL server that is on my hosting provider. And to be able to initially populate that database with the tables and the data that I need, I've gone into the package publish SQL properties for myself. And I've selected that we should connect to that destination database on my hosting provider, and that I should also pull the schema and data from my existing local ODeFood DB, put that into a script, and put it into the deployment so that will be executed against the destination SQL server when I publish. And finally, in the publish dialog, I have created another profile, so you can manage multiple profiles. The original one I called local, that's the one that deploys to my local IAS. I've created a new publish profile called odefood.com. Inside of here, I put the service URL that my shared hosting provider gave me as an endpoint for the MS Web Package Deploy tool. I've put in where I want the application deployed, and I also will have to enter my username and password in order for this to deploy, and let's give it a try. This, of course, will take a little bit longer because the publish tool will first have to pull out information from my SQL Server database and put it into a script, put that into the package. Then it's actually going to connect over the network to deploy this site. And now the deployment is finished. So let me go out and open up Internet Explorer and go to odefood.com, and let's do a hard refresh because I think that was cached. And we have successfully published this website to a live internet site via a shared hosting provider. And now that you see that working, I'll admit that this didn't actually work on the very first try. So during the break, I discovered that the shared hosting provider server that I'm on doesn't actually have ASP.NET MVC3 installed. But that turned out to not be a problem once I figured what assemblies were needed. What I needed to do was to go into assemblies like system.web.mvc, which will typically be on your server if you have MVC3 installed, and go to the properties to these assemblies and say copy local true. That essentially means don't depend on that assembly being inside of the global assembly cache on the server. Instead, copy it into the bin directory, and then when I do a publish, that assembly, and there were some other assemblies that I had to pick up too, like system.web.razor and system.web.webpages.razor. Those are all now in my bin directory, and they all get copied to the web server for me, and therefore ODeFood is now working out there. That was exciting and relatively easy.